Day 3 with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble.
I'm joined now by friend of the show, Silkie Carlo, director of Big Brother Watch, who's here to talk about these revelations that demonstrate that the kind of things we've learned from the Twitter files recently are part of a much bigger and indeed global problem. Silkie, thanks for coming on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
What has been revealed about the nature of the British government's editorialising of the narrative around the pandemic and the degree to which they're prepared to intercept and control public communication around initially this subject?
What we found through a long-term investigation is that the government has set up a number of secretive units that claim to counter disinformation. And after struggling to get information about what these units are actually doing, what we found is that they are also monitoring and recording basically dissenting opinions, people criticising the government. And this impacts MPs, journalists, academics and experts, campaigners, who are ending up in central government files with notes about things that they've said where they've criticised government policies. This was particularly happening during the pandemic. But the indication is from the documents that we've got is that they've been looking at other topics, but it was absolutely rife during the pandemic.
On this show, we've consistently said that the emerging terms, misinformation and disinformation, which are presented, of course, as a means to regulate data, ensuring that negative, conspiratorial, whack job, woo-woo, QAnon information doesn't come to dominate the public sphere, is a way in which the public narrative can be curated. It is, in essence, as you have demonstrated, a means for shutting down dissent, controlling dissenters, smearing them when necessary to ensure that only one narrative is available. Furthermore, we've regarded the pandemic, whilst to a degree as a unique phenomena, as more revelatory than anomalous. It reveals the way that power operates. So whilst at the moment you're focused on the pandemic and how these organisations that claim to be about misinformation are in fact about shutting down dissent are particularly culpable with regards to the pandemic, it's going to be applicable elsewhere. This shows you how they operate. What do you think are the most interesting aspects of the revelation? Who in particular has been affected, and what should our global audience be most concerned about?
Well, I think that the big picture, as you say, is that what we found definitively is that the words misinformation and disinformation are being used as blank checks, really, by the government to extend power over speech and over information and what people can see and what people can share, what they can hear, which is a concern. And as you say, yes, that happened during the pandemic, but the staff and the resources are now being applied to other things. So the information environment is more controlled. In terms of specifically what we've found they've done, to give you an example, David Davis, the MP, who is a well-known civil libertarian.
So he's sort of like a Republican, if it was American politics, conservative for UK audience, and quite a significant political figure, ran for leadership like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Any SAS or something cool like that.
Yeah.
I've always liked that aspect of Dave Davis. So what about him then?
So he criticised the policy of vaccine passports, mandatory vaccine passports, which lots of MPs did. It was the biggest rebellion in Parliament since the rebellion on the Iraq War.
Wow.
And yet his name and some of his media comments and social media posts about the issue are found in these counter misinformation files. Nothing that he said wasn't accurate and wasn't true. And separately, we actually had a video that we put on our Big Brother Watch's YouTube channel of David Davis giving a speech about vaccine passports removed. Of course, we kicked up a fuss about it and it was reinstated, but it now makes us think, you know, we know there are censors in government, we know there are censors on the social media companies, less so on Rumble. So what is the connection between the two? And ultimately, that's what these units are doing. They're not just keeping these records for fun. But firstly, they're doing it because they want to craft their own messaging and target their own messaging towards things that are unflattering, and to, you know, basically be able to counter some of the criticism that they're getting. But the other thing is to flag stuff to social media companies for them to take down. And we've even got ministers saying in Parliament that that's what these units are doing. They say daily, we tell the social media companies what to take down, and we are helping them to find misinformation. But until now, everyone just created in their heads, because of this vacuum of information, it must be the coordinated Russian disinformation, it must be this, it must be that. No, it's the politicians you're electing, it's the experts in your universities, it's the campaigners who are trying to protect your human rights. These are the people that are ending up in government files.
So they're using ideas around Russian disinformation and manipulation of the public space to further facilitate censorship. It interests me that political figures that one would once have assumed were part of the establishment, certainly an elected politician, is subject to censorship. This shows you that there is, firstly, it demonstrates one of the things we've been talking about on this show, that the terms left and right are becoming somewhat redundant, because the idea of personal individual freedom should be a political absolute, whether you're on the left or the right or wherever you exist. It also shows you that there appears to be an agenda. Certainly people are being censored, information is being controlled, presumably in pursuit of an objective that is so particular and bespoke that even presumed members of the government are outside of it. We've seen sort of an MP sort of censored now, that dude the other week that asked a question about vaccines. So that makes me query the nature of democracy, our understanding of democracy. Whose democracy is it? Who is pulling the strings? Where is the power coming from?
Well, can I counter one of the things that you said,
yes,
that there's not the distinction between left and right? I think there is an important distinction between left and right. Big Brother Watch is non-partisan, but I did see some right-wing narratives come into what would typically be left-wing campaigns during the pandemic. My concern is that some extreme points of views that you might associate with the right are being sold into the left. So why doesn't the left care about censorship anymore? Censorship is not even a modern right-wing quality. This is like 19th century earlier kind of stuff. But now it seems that the left is in fact is often seeking the government to do more and more censorship of inappropriate information and so on. That's my concern.
The liberal establishment advocating for authoritarianism has been one of the defining themes of the last few years. Vaccine mandates being pushed for, censorship, as you've just mentioned. So it makes me feel that the principles at the heart of that movement are in need of rigorous investigation.
Yeah.
Literally, one of the people you just mentioned, the Iraq War. I mean, Tony Blair was just at Davos talking about worldwide mandated vaccine passports. So that kind of shows where the left have come to in terms of vaccine passports and freedom of speech.
The common thread, I think, is authoritarianism, and authoritarianism has been sold into certainly the left establishment. And if we looking at the pandemic, the people who are really affected, everyone talks about being locked up at home. A lot of people weren't locked up at home. A lot of people were working. Nurses, teachers, the binmen, the postmen. A lot of people were still working. And who was advocating for them? I think there's a lot of the left that was left adrift during the pandemic. And unfortunately, because of some of the institutions of the left being enamored with the promise of authoritarianism as saving lives and all of this kind of thing, a lot of people were then funneled towards more right-wing groups. So, for example, I'm aware that there was a right-wing workers' union that was trying to scoop up some of the nurses around vaccine mandates. Many of those nurses are migrant nurses that actually that right-wing union believes don't have a right to be here. Do you see what I mean? There is a distinction between right and left, but the authoritarianism has seeped into both sides. And that's why I think you do need a non-partisan group like Big Brother Watch that and voices like yours that without fear or favour will criticise in a non-partisan way that authoritarianism.
In a sense, Silkie, what I'm saying is that centralised power has become about authoritarianism and only uses the tropes that used to be associated with the left as an aesthetic to distract from the fact that their true agenda is precisely the authoritarianism. And Gareth's point about Tony Blair ultimately being a globalist emergent in the era of Clinton, which is precisely the point where both to a degree, the Democrat Party and certainly the Labour Party in this country dissolved their traditional relationship with both the union movement, but I think even in a sort of a more diffuse way, the ideological connection to what I would call ordinary working people, and became essentially elitist parties. We're seriously comfortable with people becoming fabulously wealthy. We are funded in the same way. That's sort of like part of my major concern. So this whistleblower, Silkie, I was about to say, who is it? Like, that's the one thing you can't tell us. But should we have a look at this bit of footage together and tell us what the process is of getting a bit of information like this, obviously while protecting the source? How did you get this interview, and everything that you can tell us that isn't sensitive or dangerous? Who is it? No, not who is it. Like, how did you get this interview? How do you get in touch with a whistleblower? And how come they know this stuff? They worked there.
The whistleblower, yes, was part of the 77th Brigade of the British Army, which is an elite information ops, non-lethal psychological warfare kind of unit within the army that claims, as you would hope, to only do operations overseas. And what the whistleblower told us is that actually they were doing general searches of social media that without doubt meant that they were monitoring and then flagging up to central government Brits, people on their own soil. In terms of how we came to meet this whistleblower, it's pure synchronicity, actually. The universe works in mysterious ways. We were doing this investigation about other units within government and didn't tell anyone. And the whistleblower came to us at the same time. Should
we have a look at some of this interview?
It became very much a kind of monitoring sentiment.
Did the voice should sound like that?
We were so worried because the voice is a biometric.
What does that mean? You can identify people?
Yeah, so we were just so worried about, it's actually an actor's voice modified.
Yeah.
It's not even their voice modified.
Yeah.
You've modified it. I think you've gone too far there.
It may be, yeah. But
that's like belt and braces.
We couldn't, I'm not letting anything happen to him.
No, so that's an amazing thing that they've even found a way to bypass anything that you would do to their own voice, that now technology can find a way through that even.
You could bypass. So it's got to be an actor's voice and then disguise the actor in case the actor.
Yeah,
and no, because the actor is a member. The actor is a member of our staff, which is why we changed it.
They couldn't use the actor in the end for fear of privacy issues, so they used his dog.
My real complaint is that you've denied a proper actor like myself, who's an equity card holder and a member of SAG.
We can't afford you, I'm sorry.
I would have done that just for the experience of the role, but I would not wear that red hoodie. As you can see, I dress elegantly.
The British public and how they perceive the Conservative administration doing a COVID-19 response. It was just all logging in as a guest to Twitter and doing like what we would call a sift.
Why is he wearing that red hoodie? Is that even their red hoodie?
Is Russell getting too bogged down in the aesthetics of this?
Right, so the real story here. Who is that person and what are they wearing? I know, I shouldn't really care about those. I've got sidetracked into the wrong things.
A sift. So just inputting a search term, whether it be COVID-19, ventilators, Tory lies, whatever. Whatever the search term was, you'd run the search term and you'd look at the top tweets. There was very...
So the government in this country are also pressuring Twitter or using tweets. So what happens after that? Once they've got the information, like these are popular tweets, what are they doing then?
It's a really good question. We don't know. There's so much that we don't know. We've done endless freedom of information requests, parliamentary questions. As it stands, this unit denied it was even doing this kind of work. So, I think this will go on, and there's more. These are the questions that they have to answer. Why did they want to have records of this stuff?
In the context of what we know as a result of the Twitter file revelations, having someone in essentially a special forces position reveal that this kind of investigation and process is taking place is further evidence that governments around the world are collaborating, presumably, with big tech and are attempting to control the narrative around the pandemic. And that in itself is a demonstration that there's a kind of presumed parentalism between the governing and the governed, that it's not a sort of service organisation. What can we do for you? How can we help you during this pandemic? That they are interested in exerting control, management of power.
Sounds eerily similar to post When we were told that, the US, I guess, Army in their case, or Secret Services, were told that they were using the abilities and technology they had to spy on people abroad, but they were actually using it to spy on their own populations. It sounds like that's exactly what you're saying.
That's exactly what happened. In fact, we brought a legal challenge after the Snowden revelations about when government said that they were doing overseas interception of basically all electronic communications. What they meant was that they were tapping cables that got everything. And so the fact that, the whole domestic population was being surveilled was just like collateral. And it's the same here from, what the whistleblower is telling us is that English language communications were being monitored. And without a doubt, that will have included British people. Then the records are being sent up to central government. And we know that they have a trusted flagger status. So absolutely what they're most likely doing with these records, in fact, we know they've said on record all the time that they are flagging this stuff to the social media companies. So we don't know what they flagged, but part of their function with these reports is to go to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and say, you might want to have a look at this. Not we're telling you to take it down, but the kind of like mafia style, like you might want to think about this stuff that's on your platform and do something about it.
Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble.